Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 18 of Coloring Outside the Box. Hope your day is going well on this Saturday, November the 7th, 2020. And today I really wanted to talk about kindness. And rather than doing what people normally do, which is talk about kindness to others, I really want to talk about how to be kind to yourself. Now, this is something I'm still working on, practicing as it were, because it often seems to be something very difficult for me to do. One of the people that in my life that I respect profoundly and deeply, even though he's no longer on the planet, Reverend Harold Alston, thank you, Harold, who once said to me, Leslie, I wish you could be as kind to yourself as you are to everyone else. Now, Harold said a lot of really wise things to me during the course of the time that I knew him. And he really helped me rebuild my life. And for that, I will be eternally grateful. Yes, I'm tearing up just a teeny tiny bit. So, I was watching something on PBS a couple of weeks ago, and of course, I didn't write fast enough and didn't get the quote down. It was a Dr. Michael Merzenich, I think is how you pronounce his name, from the University of California at San Francisco, I think. Anyways, he's done a lot of work around brain plasticity. And he said something about kindness and how much it creates peace and harmony in our brain and helps us grow. I think I'm paraphrasing, so my apologies if I drew my conclusions slightly off kilter from what he said. Anyway, and it got me thinking, and of course I started thinking about how it is to be kind to others, which is our natural place to go, because when we think about kindness, we think it's about being kind to others. And we don't always know how to demonstrate kindness to ourselves. So what do I mean by being kind to yourself? Well, I don't know about you, but I have an alter ego. I don't know what you want to call it, just a voice inside my head that is always highly self-critical if I do anything that I deem inappropriate. I know for myself, I tend to have higher standards for myself than I do for others. Just let that sink in and ask yourself if that's true for you. In fact, Harold once said to me at the same time that he said that about being kind to myself, he said, you know, Leslie, when I do something that doesn't really work for me, I have a host of cheerleaders inside my head who say, oops, guess better luck next time, or something to that effect. Or just, oops, okay, let's just deal with whatever it is we created. Now, that in the last several weeks has proven to be somewhat difficult because it's funny because when the universe, and I say universe because sometimes it feels like it's outside us, but when there's a part of us that seeks us to change something about ourselves, it's almost like it will turn up the volume. So instead of intermittent times when I get annoyed that I spilled something on the floor, or I can't get an earring on, which is exactly what happened to me before I did this podcast. I tried I don't know, 4 or 5 pairs of earrings and they just would not cooperate. Or it was my ears that wouldn't cooperate. Not really sure what that was about, but it's almost, I find, very synchronistic for me that whenever I want to talk about something, I immediately have an experience prior to that sort of takes me into that energy, so I can see, once again, as if I needed a reminder, exactly how it operates. So I guess part of what we're talking about today if besides being kind to yourself, is how do we speak to ourselves? Because I know that lots of people make jokes about, oh, you talk to yourself, do you? Well, we all talk to ourselves. The question is, do we do it um, out loud, or it just whizzes around in our brain where nobody can hear it? And it's probably a bit of both. So that is part and parcel of being kind to yourself. Because sometimes we can think about how to be kind to ourselves by, oh, and I don't mean these things are not important. You know, maybe it's having your favorite dessert, or maybe it's calling your favorite friend, or there are lots of ways that we can do things that are kindness to ourselves. Make your favorite meal, go buy yourself a plant. What I really wanted to talk about today is those things that we do to ourselves internally that no one can see. At least we think no one can see them. Because quite obviously, Harold could see quite clearly that I wasn't always kind to myself. And that's something that I still struggle with. You know, one of the purposes of this podcast is to acknowledge that I'm still on the path of life, that life for me is just as much of a work in progress as it is for anyone. And that anything that I share with you is meant to be, I don't want to say evening the playing field as much as I just want to say, look, that whole expression we keep on hearing this year about we're in it together. Well, when it comes to life, we're in it together. Whether that is obvious on an external level or not, because I believe that the soul chooses to be here. And so we've always all chosen to be here now. Not some other time, but now. And part of a lot growing and changing is being kind to yourself. It is about being able to look at the things that you've done in your life and honor and respect them, no matter what the outcome or the consequences were. Because too often we measure everything based on what the end result was, as opposed to what was the process. And being kind to ourselves is part of that acknowledgement, that allowance, that acceptance that we are who we are, and we did what we did, or we're doing what we're doing. And because if we don't know how to be kind to ourselves, and we're not able to use the experiences that we're having to grow, to expand, and to change. Because really the only constant in life is actually change. And as much as we don't always like that idea, it's absolutely true. So, one of the techniques I learned about being kind, how you talk to yourself, is if you start to say something that is unkind or unwarranted, because sometimes our inner critic or our inner whatever has a habit of blowing things out of proportion, especially if we are totally focused on always doing the right thing. And here's the catch to that. Is it the right thing as defined by others, or is it the right thing as defined by you? So I don't know about you, but I often really go into what I call self-torture, because there's a situation in my life that's presented me with a choice between myself or other people. And that always leads for me to a lot of negative self-talk because I'm often inclined to put other people first before myself. And that in itself sometimes is an act of unkindness to the self. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're choosing to do things for other people that diminish who you are, that essentially take you out of the dynamic altogether and merely make you a tool or a resting place or a leaning post or any of those, that is not healthy for you, and it's certainly not appropriate nurturing for the other person. One of my challenges over the last several weeks has been looking at that very idea. Because nurturing yourself, kindness, being kind to yourself is part of nurturing yourself. It's funny how everything links together, and that even though I start talking about kindness, it loops into other things. It takes us deeper into knowledge and awareness and hopefully wisdom. And wisdom comes from being able to look objectively at your life and just be with it. Instead of breaking it down, because I know what that looks like, into pieces and parts in an effort to make sense of it so we can explain to ourselves why we did it. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. Not that I think that most things are bad, and I really need to reiterate that, I try not to use the words good, bad, right, wrong, success, and failure. Sometimes it seems inevitable. So it can sometimes feel like we're chasing our tails and asking ourselves, and here's an analogy that doesn't fit with the one I just used, which is, which came first, the chicken or the egg? But after a while, we can get in such a loop, it doesn't even matter. We're just on a loop. So what I'm asking today is how do your, how shall I put it? Less than kind loops you have in your head about yourself, not about anybody else, not about anything else, just about you. Because I really feel that often when we're busy looking outside ourselves and finding fault with this, that, and the other thing, we're unwilling to look at the root of our own discontent, our own frustration. Because, we may feel that all those feelings are unacceptable. So if we look at things that we think are unacceptable about ourselves, often we're going to go into major resistance, and that's where the unkindness to self comes in. It's hard to believe that being kind to yourself means actually staring at your demons, being willing to look at yourself from a place of, not from a place of how many things did I do inappropriately versus, oh, that's a behavior pattern that I have. And this is how I act during that behavior pattern, but what's at the root of it? So it is kind, it really is kind to ask yourself what your truth is. It's unkind to suppress it, refuse to look at it, because it doesn't go away. And it's going to pop up every once in a while or all the time, depending on where you happen to be and what you are currently asking of yourself. Because, as I've mentioned before, I really believe that humans are multi-frequency beings, and often other parts of us, other parts or other frequencies that we operate on, our soul, our spirit, our divinity, whatever you wish to call it, are asking us to look deeply into ourselves with love and with kindness, so we can release all the stuff that we have buried. That in itself is an act of kindness. And I speak to you, when I say that, I speak from experience. It doesn't always feel kind in the moment, but in the end, the liberation that comes from releasing old crap brings a lightness and a gratitude that makes life brighter, lighter, and more joyful. So I wish I could give you the 10 important steps to being kind to yourself. I think and I'm not sure there are 10 steps, and so I was being more than a little facetious. I think that there can be as many steps as you need there to be. The first thing I'd ask you to do is just to take a look at the way you talk to yourself about yourself. Without judgment, without going, oh my God, because that is also a loop, and I've been in that loop. So you do something that you think is inappropriate, and then you're crappy, you talk negatively to yourself, and then I've done it, and then I get mad at myself for talking to myself negatively. And that's just a resistance to actually looking at why I do it. And initially, you might not need to know why you do it. You might need to just notice when you do it and notice what triggers you to do that. That's a good beginning. Because as you learn to listen to yourself, you will guide yourself to appropriate ways to, oh God, my brain is not working and I can't find the word I'm looking for. And now I've lost track of what I was saying. So that's not, see, now there I was about to do it just to give you an actual demonstration of what it looks like, how it is we can talk negatively about ourselves without even thinking twice. It just happens. And I think in large part, it has to do with growing up and having to deal with taller people, older people who have expectations about who we are supposed to be when we're children. It kind of starts there. And then it carries on in our relationship with other authority figures. So back to the 10 steps or whatever steps you need. Again, the first phase is observation. Just observe. Just be with it. Notice how it feels in your body. Notice how it feels in your emotional field. Notice how, what happens in your conscious mind. Start there. And once you've done that for a while, again, you don't need to do anything about it to start out with. You just need to observe it. And observe how it functions in your world and when it functions in your world. And from there, you can begin to choose different responses. Because back to the Dr. Merzenich, I think his name is, he says that the brain has a lot of plasticity. In other words, it's very adaptable. And it's really wonderful to know that, because we are emotionally also adaptable. So it really links back in my mind anyways to a scientist I interviewed many moons ago when I was an astrologer, Bob Samples, who wrote a book I think called A Whole Mind, Whole Body, or it could be the other way around. who believes that the brain is a hologram and that 85% of your brain is devoted to sensing, feeling, and emotion, and the other 15% is devoted to cognitive thought. So if you compare those two things, you realize why the brain has that plasticity, because I don't want to say plastic because your brain isn't plastic. And I'm sure that's not the short form of plasticity, but whatever. If our brain is predominantly devoted to sensing, feeling, and emotion, we then can see how adaptable it really, really is. And all of the things that we can do to change our whole outlook and perception of the world and how we live in that world. Now, of course, these ideas excite me. And I'm going to be doing my own work to shift my own self-judgment, because really that's what self-talk, negative self-talk is about. It's about self-judgment. And I promise in this 10 seconds, I'm going to do that. And I hope that you guys take some time also to think about how that might work for you. And if you want to send me some ideas or some stories about how it's working for you, and maybe we'll revisit this in a couple of months. And I need to say that in the future, I really am thinking about my podcast, including guests. I needed some time to just sort of get used to the process. And yeah, I'm getting close to wanting to share this space and place with others. So thank you once again for joining me, and much love, big hugs, and we'll talk to you soon. In fact, not sure exactly, forgetting this moment. I think it's the 20th to 21st of November that the sun moves into Sagittarius. And so you can look for the Star Trek monthly forecast around that date. Thanks again. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.